Good to go? Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Jesse. I'm a Master of Social Work intern here at Family Advocacy.
Okay.
And my presentation today is the case against corporal punishment, or why parents should not spank their kids. So just getting to the definition, what is corporal punishment? It is the intentional infliction of pain with the intent of changing unacceptable behavior. This includes hitting, slapping, spanking, shaking, punching, kicking, choking, electric shock, pretty much any kind of way that you can imagine pain to be registered. It could be considered some form of corporal punishment. And now it's a little weird seeing some terms like punching, kicking, choking. To us that doesn't seem too much like corporal punishment and perhaps more like abuse, but the reality is that in our society, things like spanking and corporal punishment are very prevalent. I remember watching The Simpsons growing up, and every time Bart did something, Homer would choke him, and to us it wasn't anything more than funny. There's a lot of different forms of corporal punishment in our culture, and it's very widely accepted. The point and purpose of this presentation is in line with family advocacy here and our goals, one of which is to ensure the healthy development for all youth. And so that includes that we have to take into account things like behavioral problems, mental health concerns, and doing what we can do at an early age to intervene. So the healthy development for all youth, that begins very early and as early as possible. As professionals, we know that the earlier the intervention, the better for kids. And so this is what the presentation aims to focus on, is development for youth. And so when we talk about the prevalence in the United States, it is very prevalent. 87% of adults experience physical punishment at some point in childhood. I'm sure all of us can think back to either personal experience or experience from friends or family, something related to physical punishment. We all grew up with it in some way. And today, this survey being done in 2021, 45, or about half of the adults in the United States, think that a good hard spanking is sometimes necessary. So what that means is not a light slap on the wrist or any kind of lesser form of physical punishment. About half of Americans here think that a good and hard spanking is necessary for children. So this is a very popular belief in our culture. It stems across all race and nationalities and cultures, but it's very prevalent here in the United States, physical punishment. And so, as I mentioned earlier, this presentation is hoping to achieve three things. The target population here, first of all, is for practitioners like ourselves who work with children and work with parents who are involved with DCFS. We can learn techniques and ways to speak and work with our parents to help them understand the risks or possible dangers of engaging in discipline. And because discipline is such a big topic for parenting and skills, any conversation around discipline, good or bad, should be occurring. So this presentation is for us practitioners, as well as for teachers, professionals, lawmakers, and parents and future parents as well. But the points that I'm going to make here today is that the line between discipline and abuse is very unclear. It's a very fine line. And that there's substantial research demonstrating the harmful effects on children from corporal punishment. And at the end, the point of the presentation is to ask ourselves, why do we spank our children? And to start to consider other forms of discipline, or really what the role of physical punishment plays in parenting and child welfare. And so corporal punishment in the law, it is legal in all 50 states as long as it is not excessive. And so this is that first point I'm talking about, where there's a fine line between child abuse and punishment. And that's when we start looking at the definition of excessive, right? I can punish my child, but as long as it's not excessive. So what does that mean, excessive? In the past, the cases that they look at is a lot of times it's a case-by-case basis. Every situation is different, but what they look at are things like the severity of injury, the child's demeanor, the manner of punishment, age, the parental motivation and purpose of the punishment, any harm, and what it could mean for future instances of discipline. And so taken together, when we start considering how fine the line is between corporal punishment and physical abuse, it's very thin, like I said. In Illinois, neglected or abused minor, or a minor is considered neglected or abused if one of these points, they are inflicted with excessive corporal punishment. So as I said, if in Illinois you commit corporal punishment, it's not a crime. But if you inflict excessive corporal punishment, it is. So how do we define what is excessive and when does that line get crossed, right? And so for lawmakers, for parents, that puts us in a very precarious situation where if spanking your child on the hand is your typical form of physical punishment, what happens if that child goes to school with a bruise on their hand and they disclose? So there's a lot that can go wrong and a lot that does go wrong when we try to physically punish our kids. In school, during the 2017-18 school year, approximately 69,000 students were punished with corporal punishment by teachers, superintendents, principals. And here is a map of where it is allowed. The green, we are allowed to corporal punish our children in schools, and blue, it is banned. And so this is not just an issue of something that's happening in homes, where I'm talking about parents' decision how to raise their children. We're talking about teachers, superintendents, and principals who are deciding to physically punish our kids. And so what are some issues that come from this is, well, when you leave it in the hands of superintendents and principals, you have bias, right? There's discretion for the team, the school, to decide who gets punished and how. And anytime we have discretion or there is unclear in terms of the rules or the laws or regulations, we're going to get biases, we're going to get disproportions. And in this case, we see that Black students and students with disabilities are twice as likely to receive corporal punishment. So that kind of begins asking the question of why? Why do we do it? What are we trying to achieve by punishing students with disabilities and Black students with physical punishment more than the general population? In addition, about 10 to 20,000 students in 1 year required medical attention as a result of corporal punishment. And so in a testimony in 2010 by Dr. Donald Gray-Danis in front of the House of Representatives, the Committee for Healthy Families and Communities, he presented corporal punishment in schools and its effect on academic success. And what he found is that corporal punishment is ineffective for discipline and has major deleterious effects on the physical and mental health of those for whom it is inflicted. He states no clear evidence that such punishment leads to better control in the classroom. No data demonstrating that students subjected to corporal punishment in schools develop enhanced social or self-control skills. And in a 2002 meta-analysis that covered 88 studies over the period of 30 years, Gershoff found a strong association between parental corporal punishment and parental physical abuse of these same children. So what does that mean? I think a lot of us as parents would say, that would never be me. I know when to draw the line, and I would never abuse my children. The reality is, though, is that a lot of times when there is corporal punishment, there is also abuse. And so there is a process or mechanism by which researchers understand this idea of corporal punishment leading to abuse. And it's called, and they refer to it as a continuum. And so what that refers to is that parents who had abused their children revealed that as many as 2/3 of their abusive incidents began as attempts to change children's behavior or to teach them a lesson. So 2/3 of the time that they abuse their children, it started off as physical punishment that went too far, right? We all have it in our mind, I'm not gonna go too far, that's not me. But when we get in those situations and emotions are involved and everything else is happening, the reality is that it does lead to abuse. And in a recent study, between 16 and 20% of the physical punishments reported were found as severe. And so 20% of the time that parents are engaging in physical punishment, it's really abuse. And not only is it related to future being a victim of physical abuse, but here are all of the constructs that were found in this meta-analysis that were related to the effects of corporal punishment. And that's, the reality is that children do immediately comply. If I tell you to get out of the water, get out of the pool, and I spank you on your bottom, you are going to probably not get back in the water, right? But what long-term and consequences, long-term skills, and things are we teaching our child outside of immediate compliance? In fact, what's happening is that children are becoming more aggressive, and we're seeing this in childhood. They are more delinquent and antisocial. The quality of the relationship with their parents declines. Their mental health is affected. And in adulthood, people who reported being punished as children, by the time they became adults, they were more aggressive, more likely to have criminal behavior, mental health issues, and were more likely to perpetuate adult abuse of their own children or spouse.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, this is excellent. You know, but what comes to mind with a lot of this, and I see this is a problem with kids today. Parents are not allowed to discipline their children. Now, I agree with everything that is said here. But what happens when, example, Susan stays out all night? I think a parent has a right to sit down some limits. What happens, and this happens in more than black families, people of color, keeping in mind that corporal punishment and consequences are heavily used in other cultures that we need to respect because this is how they do things. But putting bleach and burning kids, all of these are horrible, as many of these things. But my question is, what happens to, because these are the things that we're seeing now that happens to children, is that the fact that many of them know, the parents, you can't hit me, you can't do this to me. So parents are at a state where they are fearful of setting rules and expectations of their children.
Right.
And that's when you see all these children out in the street, out of control, won't listen to anybody, don't go to school. Now, we got a family here, child's only 15, he don't go to school.
Yeah.
But mom can't make him go to school either.
Right.
And if she grounds him, he's not listening.
Right.
So what happens to that population? Because it's a big population.
Yeah. No, I think you make a good point, and this is something that I was considering when doing the research, is that a lot of times we have kids who are past the point of proper, and parents who have lost all control. And I think that's, your question is not related to spanking, because I would contend that spanking isn't going to change their behavior. They're just going to become more aggressive, and they're going to hate their parents more. I would just say that in general, that population of children, we are really losing control over right now. And in conversations with older folks or people in the community, sometimes I've heard, well, we just need to go back to spanking and hitting these kids. And I think it's more of a question of supervision. of the supports.
Mhm.
If mom is working 40 hours a week and she's the only person who can take care of these kids, of course the 13-year-old is going to be unsupervised.
Right.
What programs and supports can she use in the community,
Mhm.
right?
And
And
it's-
ultimately, I think we need to teach our kids to not do behaviors because of they're afraid of getting hurt,
Right.
but to do them because they're afraid of letting their parents down and afraid of letting themselves down.
Mhm.
How do we teach children to have accountability and self-respect? And I believe that when you hit a child, the consequences and the discipline, it starts there and it ends there. There's no conversation. And what that child might learn is that next time it's important for me to not get caught, right? So for a parent to slap their kid who is out all night versus having a conversation, the point of the conversation would be to teach them why or what exactly is the reasons that we don't want them out all night.
But this becomes the reason why you need to work with parents, especially younger parents,
Yeah.
when your children are babies up. This is
Yeah.
why you need these programs, because many times these parents are raised in environments where discipline was a must. I learned from it.
Right.
I knew if I got in my grandmother's face or did something, she was gonna slap me in my mouth. We ain't had no DCFS, but I learned lessons from it. But this was the older people. They weren't burning their kids, locking them in a room for punishment was deep. You know, you could get punished for a whole semester. You know, but I think it was a matter involved with that, with respect for one. You know, we didn't stand up in our parents' faces and tell them what we are not gonna do. You didn't even think about what you were not gonna do.
Right.
Because you sure would get popped.
Sure.
So the respect piece is lost with many of our kids because it's lost with the parents.
Right.
The parents had been taught, and it's not saying that we're teaching them the white culture of raising our kids. We all have our own ways of raising our children.
Yeah.
But they need to understand at the beginning is when you start this. You set limits. No, Johnny's not cute because he can say shit.
Right.
No, Johnny's not cute because he knows how to back it up. She knows how to back it up or whatever. No, you can't touch this.
Right.
Why can't you can't touch this? Because you can get hurt.
Yeah.
As opposed, I was a screaming mom, you know, and threatened. If you don't stop this, I'm gonna do that. I never did it.
Right.
So after a while, what you get is the child say, yeah. And just like I tell parents now, with certain types of discipline, children become used to it.
Right.
Now, promising you're gonna stay in 2 weeks, or you better not do it again, or I'm gonna do this. You don't do it, and you learn to do it after the kid has gotten to the point. They look at you like you're crazy. What's wrong with her? She didn't answer me, or she didn't say anything when I jumped on the furniture.
Yeah.
So, but it's all having to be done at the beginning, not in the middle.
Right.
When I see parents coming here with kids 14 and 15 out of control, what'd you do with them when they were 9 and 10 and 7 and 8?
Exactly.
Because you're dealing with this a little bit late right now.
Yeah.
And it's not going to make any changes. They're not listening to you. Just like that woman with all these kids, which got 9 or 5 or however many she got. Melissa somebody's her last name. She don't know what to do with these kids. The youngest one don't go to school. The ones that are older, they don't do nothing. So what do you expect?
Yeah. And I think everybody is trying to
learning from the other ones.
I think a lot of people are trying to wrap their minds around how do we reach the teen age group of kids who have been too far gone.
Right.
And I think it is a social crisis that we're facing for our 15 to 19-year-old boys a lot of times. But I would just contend that things like what we need are in that situation are a strong parent-child relationship. Spanking them is creating resentment. It's creating escapism. If I know grandma is gonna slap me in the mouth if she finds out about this, I'm just gonna make sure she never finds out.
Right.
And if I avoid her for a little bit, then that means I'm not gonna get hit. And we don't wanna jeopardize our relationship with our children. And these kids who are already aggressive, it's leading to more aggression.
It is, and it's leading to more problems with parents too, because I don't know if societies accept this. Not too many I know of. The acceptance of children fighting their parents, that's ugly. You know, I come out of a culture that no, this is definitely a no.
You don't
Where
get,
I see this more acceptable in your Caucasian populations with clients, they have children that they're afraid of,
Mhm.
12 years old. Where I guess when I came along, it was a long time ago, that was not even thought of. In school, yes, you had, teachers could wear your butt out.
Mhm.
I was surprised to see those numbers that you had up there for areas where that's acceptable,
Mhm.
you know, where that's acceptable.
Yeah.
in the South.
Mm.
Yeah, and right. As a parent, you can opt out of your child receiving corporal punishment. So there's still some level of personal choice there for parents.
Right, right.
If they want the superintendent hitting your 8-year-old, that's up to you.
Mhm.
But the only thing I would suggest is that for a kid who's aggressive and you're trying to teach them self-control and respect, if say Hattie is my child, I'm bigger than Hattie, I'm stronger than Hattie, and I want her to behave and listen to me. If I hit her and get compliance, what is that teaching Hattie for when she gets bigger and she then has she has the tool of power and control at her side.
Right.
We don't want to teach our children that to get what you want, you can use physical control. And that's what I'm afraid is also happening.
It is
So
happening.
you're absolutely right. I think the crisis is around how do we instill some of these values that we need in our society to be humane and take care of each other.
Yeah.
And it is out of control, and I'm not here to say that I know how to reach those kids. But
This is excellent, you know. This
yeah,
is
thank you.
excellent
But
to do.
from the research, I'm not convinced that this is the best way to do
I have
it.
a question.
Yeah, of course.
What about, because we have more fathers getting involved in their child's lives, and they're taking the responsibility of parenting their children, and the kids come with a litany of issues. What happens there?
Sure. I think
When the father is trying to not discipline by corporal punishment,
sure.
and the child knows that I can get what I want if I just sweet talk.
Yeah, that's where the idea of parenting skills comes in. And, you know, a lot of what kind of Grace alluded to and a lot of what I'll talk about later here is that we do what we know. And we don't have programs in high school teaching parents certain things, right? And so we don't know, we just do what we've been told. And that's how information's been passed on for forever, but we're in a little different time now. And, you know, I think of the story of when I first got my cat, the very first time I got Luna, she'd be scratching on my couch. And what I knew from my mom was get a little water spray bottle and spray her with it. Well, she would just start being more sneaky about when she would scratch the couch and I'd spray her and she'd look at me like she'd hate me and then keep doing it.
Right.
And so I looked up, and what it turns out is that spraying your cat won't change their behaviors. It'll just make them resent you and hate you. And so then I thought, okay, well, what can I put in the house for her to scratch on instead? And what can she use? What can I put on the couch to protect that certain area so that she'll go to other areas? And eventually she changed her behavior. And so a lot of it is spraying her is a quick and easy thing, but I have to do my research and the work to change her behaviors. And I think that's what parents, what dads are sitting in, is that any situation can be fixed with a kid. It just takes consistency and love and respect and a lot of those things that we teach here. So
an example would be Terrence.
Yes,
Daughter.
yes.
You know,
He's asking for help.
frustration is sitting in because he doesn't know what to do.
Right.
And he's afraid to even touch her to make her stop hitting him or whatever, because the system will say you have abused her.
Right.
And plus she had witnesses.
And that is the point that I made up with the first point, or what I was trying to say is that regardless of your stance on physical punishment and your choice to do it or not, you are at a risk,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It's like drinking 2 beers and driving behind the car. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna be good, but how certain are you? So those are all excellent points. I'm glad that we can have this discussion, and there'll be a little bit more here we can
That's fine.
carry on, but that was exactly what I was hoping you would chime in for, so I appreciate it. But just looking further at this type of damage that spanking and harsh corporal punishment does is that we see a reduced prefrontal cortical gray matter volume. So they can look at a child's brain and see differences in the child's brain. The prefrontal cortex is things for like impulse control, memory, those higher sort of thinking things. We can see in their brains how it's affecting them. And then not only physically, but as I refer to later, is that corporal punishment in adolescence leads to physical assaults on spouses in later life. So that link to aggression and learned behavior of how we problem solve, right? And also found that, just to kind of further what I've shown already, but that children, so I think this is kind of like what I was talking about with the cycle, where the children react negatively to the mother spanking, and then the mother reacts negatively to the child's externalizing. And by externalizing, I mean aggression, any way that you express emotions in an unhealthy way, that's externalizing. Anytime it's unhealthy, displacing it. And so it's kind of a cycle where a child gets spanked, the child is angry and resentful at their parents, and as a result, some rift in their relationship happens that leads to further punishment.
Like a girl that came here yesterday. She's 24 now, but she comes out of a real abusive situation. Got married within children in care, getting ready, children in care. So it was down the chain.
Yeah, and I think we have to ask ourselves, why do we spank our children, right? And one thing I wanted to point out with this study is that mothers who find parenting more stressful are more likely to resort to spanking. And so if parents who engage in physical punishment, we have to ask them and get deeper into it, when you are physically punishing your child, how do you feel? If in that situation you're punishing your child and you're angry, then you should not be doing it. If you're punishing them because you're more stressed, then it's an issue. And I think this study points out that parents are not using spanking because it's the most effective method. They're using it because it is satisfying to them and for their, and now there may be people who always separate their emotions when they physically punish. But the reality is what we've seen already is that a lot of times parents are doing it because they're angry.
Frustration client number 2 here. The one that plucked the baby.
Right.
In the closed room with DCFS, a room where she's supposed to visit and spend time with her child. It's as big as a bathroom stall almost. The child keeps the children, 5 and the baby, are being children. Climb under the table, on the table, pick up, sit in a little room. So she plucks the baby. That calls her for the children to be removed.
Yeah. Yeah, and we just kind of have to ask, why do we do it? It's what we know in a lot of ways, right? Is, well, my dad did it to me. Well, it must not have been for nothing, right?
Right.
There's a lot of things that we hold on to because of what our parents taught us and passed on and everything else. And we just really have to ask, did I grow up who I am because of the physical punishment, or did I grow up who I am despite the physical punishment? Would you have respected your grandma either way if she never slapped you?
Yeah.
So we have to ask what installed the respect in you and what gave you those tools for who you are now? And was it really the physical punishment? Because when we talk about fear, a lot of times when we think about what led us to doing the right thing as kids, it was fear. That's 100% fear. But for a lot of times, it wasn't fear of being hurt. It was fear of letting our parents down, fear of letting the elders down, our peers, adults, anyone in our family.
Mine was anger because she wouldn't let me go somewhere.
Yeah.
And then she ignored me when I kept asking her why. And sassy, and you make me sick. So she hit me because of that. She actually started firing knife at me. And took me to the emergency room to get them 3 little stitches too.
Well, I think it's no coincidence that for as early as a memory of that is, you still remember it very clearly.
Very clearly.
Right? And so it's a question of, was it demonstrative and learning, or was it maybe traumatic and, why then does that memory stick out? And I've seen that in a lot of situations where people will recall fondly about being punished, and then they bring up a memory that it's like, wait, why do you remember that when you were 6? And it's like, oh yeah, it's because it was very unpleasant.
I was 14. And she said, you don't talk to me like that. I remembered it. But I loved my grandmother.
Right.
And I would have respected her. I never said anything hateful to her. I respected my father, who never did anything.
Right.
But all he had to do, if I was sucking my teeth or acting like I was grown, he would call my name. All he had to do was say, all right, Gracie. And he never did anything.
Right.
But his voice,
Right.
Like he was gonna do something.
Right. I think it's important to think about all the qualities of your dad and what he did as a parent so that he could get you there without the threat of
doing
punishment,
anything. Doing anything.
So it's been an awesome discussion so far, but just now is a time where we can discuss our own experiences with